The wind carried a strange, heavy silence that night across the Carter ranch, broken only by the distant howl of a coyote and the frantic, uneven breaths of the woman lying in the dirt. The stars hung like lanterns above the vast plains, cold and indifferent, as if watching a story they'd seen too many times before. Thomas Carter's boots crunched against the frosted ground as he knelt beside her. Her body trembled, slick with sweat despite the freezing air. When she whispered, "There, it hurts." Through clenched teeth, the sound pierced the darkness like a knife. He froze. He had seen injuries before, gunshot wounds, broken bones, snake bites, but nothing like this. And in that split second, standing under the vast Wild West sky, Thomas Carter realized that the next few minutes would change both of their lives forever. Before I continue with this powerful story, if you believe in kindness and second chances, and in the strength of the human spirit, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us keep bringing you true to the heart, emotional stories from the Wild West and beyond. Now let's return to that night, to the decision that would test the limits of one man's courage and compassion. Thomas Carter wasn't a hero. He was a rancher, plain and simple, a man shaped by sunburned summers, bitter winters, and the unforgiving rhythm of the land. His hands were calloused from years of roping cattle, fixing fences, and tending horses. His heart carried its own scars, buried deep beneath his quiet demeanor. The loss of his wife 2 years earlier had turned his world into a landscape of silence. He lived alone on his ranch miles from town, with only the horses and the endless fields as company. The Wild West had a way of making men solitary. That night had started like any other. He had ridden out to check the water troughs before a storm rolled in. But as his lantern light cut through the darkness, he spotted something unusual. A horse rider slumped over the saddle, barely holding on. As the figure drew closer, he saw it was a woman, her clothes torn, her face pale. She collapsed before she could say a word. Thomas rushed to her side, dragging her gently out of the cold and into the barn, where he laid her on a bed of hay. Her breathing was shallow, her body shaking violently. And then, with a voice that was barely more than a whimper, she said those words, "There, it hurts." When Thomas pulled back the layers of fabric to see what was wrong, his heart seized. She'd been shot, low on her side, near her abdomen. The wound was messy, fresh, and bleeding fast. She must have been riding for hours like this. In the dim lantern light, he saw the blood pooling, the way her body convulsed with each breath. There was no time to fetch the town doctor. The nearest town was hours away. A storm was already rolling in, the wind picking up, turning the night bitter and dangerous. He was her only chance. Thomas had never performed anything close to surgery before. But he'd stitched animals, treated wounds, and learned enough to survive in a land where help was often miles away. His hands shook as he cleaned his old medical kit, the same one his late wife had used when she'd nursed sick animals back to health. He whispered to himself that he could do this, though his heart hammered against his ribs like a drum. He heated a knife in the lantern flame, sterilized what he could, and braced himself. This wasn't about courage anymore. It was about doing the unthinkable because no one else was there. He cut away the fabric around the wound, working by instinct and sheer will. The woman moaned, her body jerking as he pressed cloth to the bleeding. He whispered steady words, though she was barely conscious. His mind raced, recalling old stories of cowboys removing bullets on the trail. He found the bullet lodged dangerously deep, just millimeters from where it could have killed her outright. His hands steadied, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he couldn't afford to be. Hours passed like minutes. The storm raged outside, hammering the barn roof with rain, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. When he finally pulled the bullet free, his hands were slick with blood and sweat. He stitched the wound as best he could, packed it, and wrapped it tight. He didn't know if she'd make it through the night. But he sat beside her, keeping the lantern burning and checking her breathing every few minutes. His mind wandered to Laura, his wife, and how she would have known exactly what to do. He remembered her laugh, the way she'd smile even in the harshest winters. He hadn't let anyone close since losing her. And now here he was, saving a stranger. Morning came slowly, spilling golden light over the drenched plains. The woman was still alive. Her fever spiked through the day, and Thomas did everything he could. Cold compresses, boiled water, herbal remedies Laura once swore by. He barely slept, tending to her like a man possessed. As the days turned into weeks, she began to recover. Her name was Clara. She had been ambushed on her way west, robbed by outlaws who left her for dead. She'd ridden through the night bleeding just to escape them. Her strength amazed him. Clara wasn't like anyone Thomas had met. She was tough, sharp-eyed, and carried the weight of her own scars. As she healed in his modest home, their conversations turned from necessity to shared stories by the fire. He told her about the ranch, about Laura, about the years of silence. She told him about her journey, about the dreams she had of starting a new life far from the chaos of the East. Slowly, a bond formed, not rushed, not forced, but like the steady growth of roots beneath the earth. But the Wild West was never peaceful for long. A few weeks after Clara began walking again, a group of men rode onto the ranch. Thomas recognized their insignia, the same outlaws who had terrorized ranches along the valley for months. They wanted Clara. They claimed she had something of theirs. Thomas stood in front of his barn, the wind whipping through the tall grass, his hand resting on his rifle. He wasn't a gunslinger, but he was a man who had found something worth protecting again. The standoff was brief and brutal. Shots rang out across the plains, echoing through the hills. When the smoke cleared, the outlaws rode off, leaving one of their own wounded behind. Thomas had protected her, not because he had to, but because somewhere in the midst of blood, silence, and lantern light, she had become a part of his story, too. That night, Clara stood beside Thomas under the stars. She placed a hand over the spot where the bullet wound had been. It was healing slowly. "There, it hurt," she whispered with a faint smile, remembering the night he found her. He nodded, eyes soft. That wound had changed both of them. It had cracked open the walls they had built around their hearts. As spring rolled in, Clara decided to stay. Together they rebuilt parts of the ranch, mended fences, and slowly filled the empty spaces with laughter again. Thomas didn't need to say the words out loud. She had given him back something he thought was gone forever. And he had given her a second chance at life. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us keep sharing stories of courage, love, and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary people. Before you go, tell us in the comments below, have you ever experienced a moment where one act of kindness changed everything? We'd love to read your story.